Yesterday, I've been working with my bass boat and been trying to come up with a solution to a problem I've been having, and so and I just kept thinking about it, and I discussed the problem with a friend and everything like that, and hitting around ideas and whatnot. And my friend said, maybe you're just overthinking it. Keep it simple. So it got me to thinking that'd be um, yeah, he's right. And this morning, just the word overthinking just is just sticking in my head. So I went to the scriptures to my Bible, try to see if there's anything specifically on overthinking mentioned in the Bible. And there's not a verse or anything that specifically states the word overthinking. But I believe the Spirit did lead me to something that doesn't define what overthinking is, but it definitely provides a solution to an overthinking problem that you might be having. On whatever it is that you're overthinking about. I found it in Daniel chapter 2, verses 12 through 18. And to kind of give the backstory before you actually hit these particular scriptures, is that during the second year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, um, he was troubled by a reoccurring dream that came back to him, and it got to the point to where he was becoming anxious about it. It was always on his mind. He was overthinking about this dream. So he called all his sorcerers, his soothsayers, for his psychics, his wise men, you know, whoever he thought might be able to give him an answer to what this dream meant. Of course, Nebuchadnezzar was not a believer of God. He followed other gods, um, and and you know it got to the point where it consumed him so much that he was so desperate for an answer that he was willing to reward anybody, anything their hearts desire, if they could interpret it. But on the flip side, he told people, if you say you can interpret it and you don't, I'll kill you. So, um, anyways, all these people that the king relied on finally told him, what you're asking for is impossible. The only thing that can answer your question are gods, and gods don't live with us. So, you're just out. Well, this angered the king so much that he made a decree to have all the wise men of the land killed. So, and this is where we're going to start off with verse 12 in chapter 2. Because of this, the king became indignant and very furious and gave orders to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them. Then Daniel replied with discretion and discernment to Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, who had gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He said to Arioch, the king's commander, "For what reason is the decree from the king so urgent?" And the Arioch informed Daniel about the matter. So Daniel went in and requested of the king that he would give him time in order that he might declare the interpretation to the king. Then Daniel went to his house and informed his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, about the matter, so they might request compassion from the God of heaven concerning the mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So Daniel and his three friends were among the brightest of the Israelites that were taken into captivity uh, from Jerusalem's fall. Um, and so Arioch is going out, performing the king's decree of slaying all the wise men. And when he comes to Daniel, and Daniel very calmly asks Arioch, what's going on? Um, and why was this happening? And why did it have to happen now? So, Arioch informed him of the situation. And Daniel very calmly asked, um, as that the king might give him time to, you know, look into this and then give him an interpretation to the dream. So Daniel was afforded the time. Um, Arioch didn't kill him, allowed him time, and so the very first thing Daniel did was went to his friends, and they together prayed to God so that they might get an answer and an interpretation to the king's dream, which Daniel was already known for being able to interpret dreams. Um, but Daniel didn't overthink this. He heard the problem, he heard the solution. He immediately, you know, went to his friends, and they all prayed together for God, for compassion, and for the ability to interpret the dream. And of course, God does, in fact, give Daniel the revelation of the dream, and he passes the revelation along to the king. And even though the king doesn't believe or follow God himself, uh, he does recognize the validity of Daniel's interpretation about his dream, and so so Daniel and his three friends were spared. But Daniel went about the right went about solving the problem the right way. You know, he went to his friends, fellow followers, fellow believers of God, counseled counseled with them together, and then they all came to consensus to ask for God's favor in finding the interpretation for the dream. They didn't overthink it. They let God provide them with the answers. So, like I said, and it got me to thinking, after discussing my boat issue with my friend yesterday, and it just kept on my mind. So I felt that this was something that the spirit was wanted me to show, and finally, after much overthinking, ironically, about this, I finally just asked the spirit, guide me to a verse where maybe the actions of somebody shows how not to overthink this. And then this is when I came across Daniel chapter 2, verses 12 through 18. Perfect example of not overthinking, Daniel went to friends, fellow believers, and they prayed together and allowed God to provide them with the answer that the king so desperately was wanting to find out. How much simpler would it be for us in our lives if, when we had problems that we can't solve and that we just keep thinking on and thinking on and thinking on, how much simpler would our lives would be if we would just surrender and get ourselves out of our own ways and ask for God and for friends in prayer for solutions to what we're going through. Just some words of thoughts. So I love you guys. Y'all have a blessed day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.